sometimes, even as Christians, worshiping on Sunday morning isn't our hugest priority. We might go out of our way to be present on Easter or Christmas. We might make a point of coming on Mother's Day, but most Sundays we've just got other stuff going on. We're just exhausted. We've got no energy left to try to get together and get there. We just don't feel like being around people. We just need some downtime, some quiet time, and God understands, right? Like, he doesn't care about ritual. He knows our hearts, and he knows that we love him. And really, we just worship every day, don't we? That we just live each day sort of acknowledging who God is and our appreciation for him in our life. So surely for God, that's enough. That's a very common way for even those of us who are trying to be followers of Jesus to sometimes think. We don't want to put so much emphasis on a ritual. We don't want to make it seem like we're earning our salvation by doing good works, even good works like coming to church. So we try to justify, well, maybe that's okay. But that's the wrong approach. It's the wrong approach because it's not what we see Jesus' earliest disciples, led by his handpicked apostles, doing as they were trained to be like Jesus. It's not the right approach because it misses how that experience of Sunday morning worship launches us into a life of everyday worship. Because it's undeniable from passages like Acts chapter 20 and verse 7 that Jesus' first followers gathered together on Sundays. In Acts chapter 20 and verse 7, as the Apostle Paul was in the midst of a mission trip visiting the city of Troas, we're told that on the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to break bread, Paul talked with them, intending to depart on the next day, and he prolonged his speech until midnight. And in case you think, well, maybe that's just something they did in Troas, or maybe that's just something they did at that point of time in the AD 50s, where that falls on the timeline of biblical events, consider the report of a Roman governor named Pliny, writing to the Roman emperor Trajan in the early 100s AD, several decades after this, at a time where Christians were being fiercely persecuted just for being Christians. Pliny had rounded up some folks accused of being Christians, but once he started questioning them, he was really struggling with how best to charge them for the crimes they were committing, especially as he reported to Trajan just what exactly those crimes were. Pliny wrote to the emperor that the sum and substance of their fault or error had been that they were accustomed to meet on a fixed day before dawn and sing responsively a hymn to Christ as to a God, and to bind themselves by oath not to some crime, but not to commit fraud, theft, or adultery, not falsify their trust, nor to refuse to return a trust when called upon to do so. When this was over, it was their custom to depart and to assemble again to partake of food, but ordinary and innocent food. Pliny mentioning that last part because it was a common rumor among the pagans in that time that Christians were cannibals, that when they worshiped, they ate somebody's body and they drank their blood. Yet when Pliny was examining people accused of the crime of Christianity, he found that their crime was meeting on a fixed day to sing, to pray, to break bread, to affirm and encourage and hold each other accountable, to live a kind of life that was consistent with the life of Jesus, that did good and shone light. For some of us, is that something we would be accused of? Would we be accused of the crime of meeting consistently to worship God and encourage our fellow Christians? But even if we would, if we are very faithful about assembling to worship, consider also that it doesn't end on Sunday. The reason Paul preached until midnight to the Christians in Troas was because it didn't end on Sunday. The reason that Pliny heard about these Christian assemblies going the way they did is because it didn't end on Sunday. That Sunday morning assembly, that worship that they shared, or when they came back together to break bread, those assemblies served a purpose of motivating the followers of Jesus for how they lived all the rest of the day and all the rest of that week. We get a snapshot for just what the Christian life looked like in Acts chapter 2. Verses 42 through 47. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. This is God's design for church. This is God's design for our assemblies, for our worship together. That time together stirs in us devotion, heartfelt commitment, and investment of everything we are, so that each day we are living for Jesus, so that our relationships with each other are changed, so that our relationship with the world around us is changed, so that we are motivated to do things that we would never have done otherwise every day of the week because we are fully devoted to Christ. You see, it's not an either or, where you either come to church on Sundays or you worship every day. God's desire is that your experience of worship on Sunday launches you into a daily experience of awe. That reminder of who he is, of what he's doing, opens your eyes to the world as it really is, to the reality that Jesus is risen and that he is the King, and that motivates how you act when you walk into your workplace on Monday, that it motivates what you talk about with your family each weekday evening at the supper table. That as you go through every day of your life, you're seeking out connection with those folks that you go to church with. You're inviting one another over for dinner. You're spending time together praying. You're spending time together eating. You're spending time together serving, even sharing from the abundance that God has provided you to care for the needs of others. When we are approaching Sundays the way God intended, it's not a one and done deal. It's not something where we get to say, okay, well, I'm a good Christian because I came on Sundays, while those who didn't aren't. No, that Sunday morning experience of God's presence, that experience of God's presence together as his people, is meant to be the starting point for a whole week of awe and wonder as we see what God is doing, of a whole week of generosity and love and connection and fellowship, so that when Sunday comes back around, we get together and we do it all again. So that every week we're renewed and we're refreshed and we're ready to go in each day and serve Jesus. That is what Christian worship is meant to accomplish. And if we'll let go of our excuses and come into his presence, if we will gather together, we will be amazed. We will be in awe as we see God at work on Sundays and every day of our lives.